Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today's presentation is about data sampling frameworks as part of observational research. Well, as you know, this video is part of our observational research playlist. I invite you to watch previous videos. And to remind you, we are here in the family of observational or correlational research, where we are using non-manipulative research approaches. Well, the objective of the presentation of today is to help you design a data sampling framework and in the same time help or to provide a template for conducting or for designing a survey. I'm going to talk about data sampling frameworks in general, how to define your target population, the sample representativity and its importance, how to define your sampling methods, define your sampling precision, your non-sampling errors calculations, and some takeaway messages. Well, the data sampling framework is a logical frame for your sampling process in general and for your data collection. And the logical framework is very useful when you conduct a statistical analysis. So when we talk about sampling framework, it combines the population and defining what is the population, which is the entire aggregation of cases that meets a specified set of criteria. It entails also sampling method that you are going to use, which is the process of selecting a portion of the population that represents the entire population, and by that achieving or respecting the representativeness aspect. And here we look at the types of samples, meaning that we are looking at the list of respondents and the contact persons that will form the exact number of your study observation. And also the data sampling framework entails the accessible population, which is the population of people that is available for your study, so that when you are collecting the data about your accessible or your sample of population, only then after statistical analysis you can or not generalize information in relation to the target population, which is the entire population in which the researcher is interested and to which he or she wants to generalize the results. Also, as part of the data sampling framework, we are talking here about the type of observation that you are going to conduct. Are we going to use primary data through mechanical data collection through devices or through humans by interviews or questionnaires, or we are going to do data collection through secondary data, through online repositories, through internet, or even by visiting physical repositories and collecting this secondary data from archives. So this is important to define. Also, as part of your data sampling framework is to define the type of responses if you are going to collect data through human beings, which means that you need to address the issues of consent, you need to address the issues of ethical approval, you need to address the issues of anonymization of your data. And talking about the data, this brings me to the last part, which is the code book. You need to have a code book when you start to process your data, and this code book will explain the data's layout in the data file you are using and explain the data code's meaning so that others can understand how did you do the coding process and the coding steps. Now, also as part of your data framework is that you need to define the type of analysis you are going to conduct. Are you going to conduct descriptive analysis with analysis that is describing the identity and the trend of your data set, or you are going to use inferential statistics or parametric statistics that is seeking to define the variance or the association or the correlation or the causality. So these are all important information that needs to be included in your data sampling framework. Now, when we talk about a data sampling framework, what is it exactly? Let me explain to you. Well, a data sampling framework will address the following information about how you are going to statistically collect or treat your data, and also how you are going to collect it. So here we're looking at how are you going to test relationships, how are you going to identify the trends over time, how you are trying to make sense of your information, how you are going to address the geographical coverage. You need to know how you are going to address the data collection process regarding how much it costs, the money, the time it requires, and there is a need for a sampling framework always in order to define your statistical analysis scope, what will be done, what will be not done. This is an example of a very interesting sampling framework where you can see it's visualized here, Flas et al. 2022, and this is designed to provide a template to design and conduct surveys, I invite you to download the study of Flas and Tal and check how this sampling framework or data sampling framework was described and how it was illustrated, because it's a very good example. Now, as part of your sampling framework, you need to understand exactly what it is. So actually, allow me to reiterate here. A sampling or a data sampling framework is a set of standards. It sets out the standards of participation with respect to sampling, which are aimed at maximizing the reliability of your research outcomes. So it's so crucial, it's so important. Also, the framework outlines the key roles and the responsibilities with respect to the sampling and the survey design. So therefore, it's very important. Also, as part of your data framework or sampling framework, you will need to address bias. So here, this data sampling framework will allow you to address this bias and address the problems that could happen through convenient sampling or under coverage of your sampling, or the non-response of your respondent, or the judgment sample, or the misspecification of your target population, or the poor data collection quality during your campaign. So when you define your data sampling framework, those aspects will be taken into consideration as potential biases and how you counterbalance it. So increase your consciousness and make you more using a valid approach when you start launching your survey. Now, when we talk about the data sampling framework, one of the most important aspects here is to talk about the target population, and this is point number 2 here. So it will allow you to define your target population and the data sources that you will use to reach this population, and here also you will define the coverage and exclusion criteria in order to narrow the scope of your population or your target population. So the population, when we talk about it, it is the entire aggregation of cases that meets a specified set of criteria, and therefore you will need to have eligibility criteria to define it. Also, a third important aspect of your data sampling framework is to talk about representativity. Well, here we are looking to assure this representativity, and in order to do that, we need to address the sample source, which includes the whole target population, and we need to define the selected data collection methods. Are we going to collect it online, by phone, by paper, that can reach individuals with characteristics typical to the population interest. Now, moving to the sampling method, point number 4, what can I do here? Well, I need to define the sampling method because it's the process of selecting a portion of the population to represent the entire population. And the type of sampling needs to be defined here. The list of respondents, the contact persons, the sample size, all these are information that need to be included in my sampling method. Also, I need to define here the sampling and participation standards. What will be the roles and responsibilities? What will be the documenting, how I'm going to document my sampling plan, how I'm going to prepare for the sampling framework, how I'm going to calculate the outcomes with my statistical analysis, and what will be the standard errors I'm going to seek as part of my work. And definitely you will define if you are going to work with probability or non-probability sampling, and the different associated types of sample that will be chosen in order to represent the population. Now, one of the important aspects also when we talk about your data sampling framework is to talk about the sample precision, and this is a very important point. When we talk about sample precision, we are talking here about the choice that I'm going to make to represent the population. So I'm looking at the sample size, is it a subset of a population, the stratification, the sampling frame I'm going to use, and the drone sample that I'm going to work on. And here I'm mainly focused on random and purposive sampling as two techniques that counter each other's. Most of the time when we're working about observational research, we focus on random sampling. Also, this will involve that you start to calculate your sample size. So, for example, a minimum sample size depends on your field, but it varies from 30 subject to 3,000 subject depending on your domain. So you need to refer to the criteria of your field, you need to refer to the literature in your field, and you need to refer to expert and see what is the acceptable sample size in your field and domain in regard to the observation that you are trying to measure. Also, as part of this step is that you need to address the representativity, and here you need to calculate the frequency distribution of your sample, And here you need to calculate the sample mean and deviation and make sure your sample variability is low to reach high representativity. By that, you are making sure that your population it shows represent the larger population. Also, you need to measure the population variance as part of your data sampling framework. And here we are talking about the population variance that measures the spread out of your group data points, and it quantifies the average square deviation from the mean. And also, if all data points are very close to the mean, the variance will be, in this case, small. And if the data points are spread out over the wide range, the variance will be larger. So the better, the larger, the higher the variance, it is better, and the lower it is worse. And also we need to have screening criteria, which means that we need to have screening criteria that truly reflects the target population to make sure that they are well represented in our population sample as part of our sample precision procedures. Now, the last step that I need to take into account when I'm designing my data sampling framework is to look at the non-sampling errors. And here by non-sampling errors, I'm talking about random and systematic errors that can appear. I'm talking here about non-sampling errors that refers to all sources of error that are unrelated to sampling. Non-sampling errors are present in all types of surveys. They include census, national censuses, and administrative data. And non-sampling errors can be classified into two groups: random errors and systematic errors. And you need to report on them while you are developing your data sampling framework. And the type errors can vary. It could be coverage errors, like consisting of omissions, for example. You have an undercoverage of a certain group or a certain type of population, erroneous inclusions, you can have duplications, you can have misclassification or overcoverage of a certain group of units in the survey frame. Also, it can include measurement errors. For example, they are called response errors. In this sense, it's the difference between the measured value and the true values while you are conducting your survey. Also, it includes the measurement error, poor questionnaire design, interviewer bias themselves, respondent error, problems with the survey process. So these are all examples of the type of errors under the measurement error type that could appear or occur during conducting your survey. The number 3 type of error is the non-response error, which is estimates obtained after response has been observed and imputation has been used to deal with this non-response, which is usually equivalent to the estimates that would have been obtained had all the desired values have been observed without error. So when we have missing data and we start to do imputation, sometimes this imputation is not correct, so this is considered the non-response error. And the difference between these two types of estimates, the real one and the estimated one, is considered as a non-response error. In this sense, we are looking at the total non-response error or the partial non-response error, and they can be calculated statistically and reported as part of your data set. Also, the last one, a type of error that is famous and commonly part of the types of error of sampling error, is the processing error. And here we are talking, they occur during data processing. It includes all data processing activities after collection and before estimation, such as errors in data capture, coding, editing, the tabulation of the data, and in the assignment of survey weights. So these are all examples of coding errors, data capturing, editing, and imputation errors. So this is the fourth type of error that needs to be taken into account, and every time you are developing your data sampling framework, you are aware about those 4 types of errors: the coverage error, the measurement error, the non-response error, and the processing error. Those 4 errors need to be reported and how you are addressing them. Well, this is the end of today's presentation of data sampling frameworks. Well, what is the takeaway message? Well, the takeaway message number 1, design the sampling framework or your data sampling framework in consultation with a survey expert to reach designated sample members. If you never conducted observational research, if you never conducted a survey, and you never launched a campaign in observational research to collect data, it's very important that you design properly your data sampling framework and that you review it with experts in the field before starting your data collection process. Define and validate the population and sampling techniques early on. And again, you will need here to seek expertise. Develop your sampling framework, which is the most effective way to design a good survey and collect correct information in a very short time. And make sure that you provide incentives and use appropriate contact methods to get a high response rate. Without that, it will be very difficult to have a high response rate. And make sure to define all the risks associated with the sampling from an error point of view, whether you have a bias or a non-sampling error, or you have limited resources, or you have problem with accessibility. By that only you can be ready to have a solid data sampling framework that will be successful, and it will work when you move with the data collection process and with the data processing step with statistical tests. Well, this is the end of today's presentation. Today's presentation is part of a playlist on observational research. I invite you to watch following videos that will provide more detail on statistical tests, and I thank you for your attention. Today's presentation was about data sampling framework in observational research. Thank you.